Well, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our Exploring Oregon's Estuaries webinar. This week we are celebrating both Sea Otter Awareness Week and National Estuaries Week. So this webinar was a natural collaboration, and we're really excited to show you all why estuaries are important to sea otters and why sea otters are important to estuaries. So we'll start the conversation with Annie, who is the Estuaries and Ocean Manager at Oregon Shores. And then Chanel will talk to us about sea otters. She's from Elakha. And my name is Katie. I'm from both. I'm the Education and Outreach Manager for Oregon Shores, and I'm a board member on Elakha. So it's really fun to be able to bring these two organizations together for this webinar. And Annie, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you for the introduction, Katie. Let's see, one moment. Okay. Hi, everyone. So before we get started, I just wanted to start by telling you a little bit about Oregon Shores. So we're a nonprofit organization whose mission is to engage, educate, and empower people to protect and increase the resilience of the coast's ecosystems, landscapes, and communities. Our focus area is the entire Oregon coastal region, from the Columbia River to the California border, and from the crest of the coastal mountains to the edge of the continental shelf. And we fight for coastal conservation through legal action and advocacy. And we engage our network of volunteers and members in community science projects and essentially mobilize participation in public policy. In the past several years, one of our priority areas has been estuaries, which is what I'm here to tell you about today. And this is our dream team at Oregon Shores. Oh, pardon me. Yeah, we have a small but mighty team. We all have different specialties and areas of focus. So collectively, we can do more to advocate, engage, educate, and inspire action to protect the coast. So I'm Annie Merrill. I'm the Ocean and Estuaries Manager. And we'll kick it off talking about estuaries. So first, I just want to say happy National Estuaries Week. These habitats are super important. I studied estuarine ecology in my master's program at Oregon State. So I'm just super jazzed to be here to talk to you all about why estuaries matter. So we're going to start with some basic estuaries 101. So estuary classification, ecology. I'm going to talk a bit about habitat types, ecosystem services, threats to estuaries, and then essentially what we're trying to do about it. All right. So to start off, what is an estuary? Well, in the most simple terms, it's a coastal body of water where fresh water from rivers and streams mixes with salt water from the ocean. So there are a number of really diverse examples of estuaries across the world. Some are really large deltas. Some are partially enclosed and sheltered from the coastal ocean. There's deep and shallow estuaries, what have you. So no matter how varied, estuaries and their surrounding lands are essentially places of transition between land and sea. So that the health of our estuaries is extremely interconnected with the conditions in the watershed and the rivers and the nearshore ocean and vice versa. So that's something I'm going to be touching on quite a bit today. All right, so the diversity of estuaries across the world has a lot to do with how they were shaped over geologic time, and they're essentially classified accordingly. So fjord estuaries have been carved out from glacial activity, for example. Tectonic estuaries occur when tectonic plates collide and create a depression. And then there's two types of estuaries that you'll find in Oregon, and those are the drowned river and bar-built estuaries. So bar-built estuaries occur when barrier islands form from the accumulation of sand or sediments, as you can see in this photo here of Netarts Bay. And that's a very ocean-influenced estuary. You can see a lot of sand built up. And then drowned river valley estuaries are formed when rising sea levels flood existing river valleys. So this is the case for Nestucca, Tillamook, Yaquina, Coos, and Nehalem Bays. And there's a photo there of Nestucca. So not only are estuaries varied in geology and morphology, but the features of an estuary are very influenced by physical, chemical, and climatic conditions in a given region. So they're incredibly dynamic ecosystems where conditions vary across time and space based on the volume of fresh water and salt water flowing in at any given moment. So, in the rainy season, estuaries can be very freshwater dominated, and in the summer, they tend to be a lot more ocean dominated. And then estuary mixing processes are also influenced by tidal fluctuations, storms, snowmelt. So conditions in a single estuary are never the same. And then generally these dynamic processes that influence these estuaries create really unique conditions across the landscape, which support a diversity of life, both marine and terrestrial. So you can see in this photo here, there are a number of different types of features you might find in an estuary. Okay, so now I'll talk about those features. These diverse environmental and physical conditions lead to a diversity of habitat types found within one single estuary. And so because these estuaries are brackish transition zones where the rivers and the ocean input and mix nutrients, they're actually one of the most productive ecosystems on the planet. Uh, the nutrients that come into estuaries from both the rivers and the ocean, they fuel a variety of plant life. So microscopic plants like phytoplankton that make up the base of the food web, but they also support a wide diversity of aquatic and terrestrial plant life. So you'll find a variety of habitats like eelgrass meadows on the tide flats, tidal swamps pictured here in the top right, freshwater marshes, mud flats, and all of these habitats, because a lot of them are plant-based, they sequester a lot of carbon. They're also really important habitats for many species. So these are some species highlights as examples. A wide variety of freshwater, terrestrial, and marine species utilize our estuaries during various parts of their life. So they're truly biodiversity hotspots. In particular, many commercially important fish species like salmon, rockfish, herring, and Dungeness crab, they utilize estuaries during the juvenile phases of their life. So estuaries are considered nursery habitat for a lot of species. They also provide really important wintering habitat and forage area for birds. And then they host a wide range of clams and shellfish that are important for clamming industries. And then also, I just want to point out that endangered and threatened species depend on estuaries. And some examples of those include the native Olympia oysters in Oregon, black brant, brown pelican, Chinook and coho salmon, and then also orca and sunflower sea stars, because orca need salmon and estuaries support salmon. Orcas depend on our estuaries for their livelihood as well. Okay, so I really just want to emphasize that estuaries support the health of our nearshore ocean ecosystems in a number of ways. So first, a big one is that they filter water entering the oceans from our watersheds. So if an estuary has, healthy wetlands and vegetative habitat, it essentially acts as a filter, and it reduces the presence of pollutants and sediments and even minimizes harmful algal blooms. If an estuary is degraded, it is less capable of providing this ecosystem service, so you'll see reduced water quality in the nearshore ocean as well. And we also talked about how estuaries provide nursery habitat for juvenile fish, but those juvenile fish get older and migrate to the ocean as adults. And so in this way, estuaries directly support marine food webs and bolster fish populations that support recreational fisheries and commercial fisheries as well. So in this way, estuaries strengthen coastal economies. So cities tend to be built on estuaries due to the shelter they provide for ports and other infrastructure. It's estimated that approximately 40% of the US population lives on or near an estuary. So, some of the largest cities around Chesapeake Bay and San Francisco, they're located on estuaries, and that's no different on the Oregon coast, although we have smaller cities. The biggest coastal cities are, Astoria, Newport, and Coos Bay, all of which are directly on an estuary. So it's no surprise that the estuaries support economies by providing jobs in fisheries and seafood processing, aquaculture, tourism, and they also offer all kinds of aesthetic and cultural values and recreation opportunities that supports tourism and just general well-being. So another really great thing is that estuary habitats save communities money by protecting infrastructure and mitigating coastal hazards, which I'll talk about next. So protecting estuarine habitat is increasingly being recognized globally as a natural climate solution. So this is one really big reason that Oregon Shores is focusing on estuary conservation. So because climate change will increase the frequency and severity of storms, and sea levels are going to rise, estuarine habitat offers the first line of defense against these impacts by dampening wave energy and buffering storms, which protects coastlines and slows erosion. Wetland habitats also act as giant sponges, and they're really effective at controlling floodwaters. So that'll be more important with, increased storms and sea level rise. And then estuaries are really effective at sequestering and storing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, effectively combating climate change. So estuary sediments can store carbon 10 times as quickly as sediments in forests. And if undisturbed, they can store carbon below the ground for thousands of years. And then this can also be at a gigaton scale. So it's estimated that a 150-acre estuary can sequester between 4,500 and 9,000 tons of carbon, which is equivalent to taking 3,000 to 7,000 cars off the road every year. And that's if an estuary is functioning as it should. And then aquatic plants and estuaries, in particular eelgrass and wetlands, or eelgrass has been found to buffer ocean acidification, which protects nearby sensitive species and shell building organisms from those impacts. All right, so bringing it back to Oregon, Oregon has 22 estuaries, and all are really special and unique. The largest is the lower Columbia River, which is an estuary. And then there are tiny rivers like Elk River that are still considered estuary. And then there are two bays in particular that are pretty significant. Tillamook Bay is quite iconic. It was nominated as a bay of national significance under the Clean Water Act due to its regional economic importance and ecological significance. But it also has really severely degraded water quality. So this designation formed a national estuary program with the goal of restoring and conserving the bay and all of Tillamook's watersheds. So there's a really great program called Tillamook Estuaries Partnership that's working on restoring that estuary. And then Coos Bay is home of the South Slough National Estuarine Research Reserve, which was designated in 1974. So they're actually celebrating their 50th anniversary this week. And this protected around 4,000 acres of the Coos Bay and the surrounding watershed, and it's stewarded by the Department of State Lands. And this area is really awesome because the slough is essentially an estuary within an estuary. It's an arm of the estuary that acts like a small estuary in and of itself. So it's been really crucial for research to really understand estuarine processes, water quality, what works for restoration, etc. So those are just some awesome estuaries to highlight. So as I was talking about before, a lot of cities tend to be built on estuaries, and because of the values they offer people, the development is pretty rampant. So it's no surprise that human land use changes and development over time in our estuaries can have massive impacts on the health and functioning of our estuaries. And so land use changes in the watershed from agricultural and forestry production have had an impact on water quality. All of our estuaries are actually considered to be impaired in water quality. our estuaries were dramatically changed over the past century. So tidal flow was blocked to create farmland, wetlands were filled to develop roads and cities, channels have been modified, and oysters have been overharvested. So all of this has dramatically changed how our estuaries function. And around 50% of our wetlands have been lost in Oregon as a result of this development. And we're actually also seeing a significant loss of eelgrass habitat in many of our estuaries, which is pretty alarming for those of us who know how important eelgrass habitat is for fisheries. Okay, so fortunately, the train of uncontrolled development over the past century has slowed down significantly with the creation of our land use planning system and the coastal zone management program in the 1970s. So in Oregon, we have a set of 19 statewide planning goals managed by the Department of Land Conservation and Development. And these collectively direct the state's resource management and guides local land use planning. So goal 16 is focused explicitly on estuaries. It guides the management of estuarine resources. And so in this goal, we have the 22 major estuaries and 17 minor estuaries, each of which have been classified according to the level of development that is appropriate for those estuaries. So you can see some of those designations on the map here. And then each estuary has an estuary management plan that guides how our estuaries are managed. So cities and counties, where they essentially, if they share jurisdiction over an estuary, they share an estuary management plan. And within these plans, estuaries are essentially divided into management units based on the resources present at the time of creation. So this map, for example, shows all the management units in Yaquina Bay. And essentially, the management units have different degrees of protection. Natural management units having the strictest regulations around types of uses that might degrade habitat, while development units are least restrictive. So that's where you'll find jetties and navigation channels. So essentially, in summary, these estuary management plans determine who can do what, where in an estuary. And in these plans, it contains all of the regulations for restoration and development that call out sort of what our estuary can and should look like. And so why does this matter? This is a big deal because our estuary management plans have essentially proactively shaped how our estuaries look. And a lot of them were created around 40 years ago. So they're decades old. And they work to balance development and resource protection and the diverse needs of communities. And however, proactive that these plans were in shaping how our estuaries look now and protecting critical habitat, because they haven't been updated in 40 years, there's still a lot missing. There's essentially the estuaries are looked at in isolation without connections to the watershed and the shorelands. So there's definitely opportunities to make estuary planning more holistic and think about the whole watershed. Climate change, we now know how much of a threat that is to estuarine habitats. So it's really important that these plans be updated to reflect all the changes in conditions and to think more proactively about, what we want our estuaries to look like going forward. And so this is important because this is a public process. So there are opportunities for communities to get involved in these estuary management plan updates to shape how their estuaries are going to look like in the future. So it's a conservation tool. That's how we see it. So this is an opportunity to impact real change for our estuaries by engaging in this process. And Oregon Shores has launched a campaign to do just that. So our goal is to build public awareness and support for estuary planning so we can collectively advocate for policies that enhance estuary conservation and restoration opportunities. So far we've been doing this work in Yaquina Bay and Coos Bay because they're the first estuaries to undergo an update in 40 years. And we've been actively engaging in this process every step of the way. We also disseminate information, host events, and develop comment guides and different materials to support communities in engaging in the planning process. So we're also about to begin this work in Clatsop County and in Lincoln County. There are a handful of estuaries that are going to be going through an update in the next year or so. And the key objectives of our campaign are to advocate for more holistic ecosystem-based management of our estuaries that considers the connections between the ocean and the watersheds and the shorelands. We also aim to increase ecosystem and social resilience to climate change within the plan framework so that communities are better prepared for climate hazards. And then we also focus a lot of our attention on blue carbon habitats. So these are our seagrass meadows and wetlands that, as I discussed earlier, offer a lot of climate benefits by sequestering carbon. And then we also aim to increase public awareness about the importance of our estuaries, which is why we're here today celebrating National Estuaries Week. And we aim to engage communities in estuary planning. So our work doesn't stop there. We're also taking any opportunity to weigh in on environmental impacts to our estuaries, where big projects are concerned, such as the Pacific Intermodal Container Terminal being proposed in Coos Bay. We're also taking a statewide approach to protecting eelgrass habitat, which again has been disappearing really rapidly in some of Oregon's estuaries over the past several years. So I'm in Salem right now briefing legislators on the importance of eelgrass, for example. And there are a lot of ways to get involved in this work. You can scan this QR code and sign up for our newsletter, indicate that you're interested in estuaries. It makes it really easy for us to contact folks that live in a certain region where an estuary management plan is going through an update, so we can get a better sense of who's interested, who wants to get involved. We can send you all kinds of information and updates on the planning process so that folks can engage more effectively. We also have some fresh merchandise for Estuaries Week. So you can buy some cool merch created by Sarah Sampson, this really great artist on the coast. She made our logo, and proceeds go to Oregon Shores to help support the work we do. And then we also have a couple of upcoming estuary events this week. So we have a pub talk at Pelican Brewing on Siletz Bay in Lincoln City this Thursday, and an estuary paint and sip in Newport on Friday. And proceeds for tickets at that paint and sip goes to Oregon Shores. So that's another way to have fun, celebrate estuaries, and support our work. And you can also reach us at oregonshores.org. Check us out on social media. You can email me directly if you have any questions or want to learn more about estuaries near you. And with that, I want to thank you all and turn the time over to Chanel.
Thanks, Annie. Let me get my screen situated. All right, I accidentally moved it, so hold on, let me get it right. Okay, well, there we go. All righty. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining tonight. And it is also National Sea Otter Awareness Week. I wonder if whoever the planners were for these big weeks of the year knew that Estuary Week and Sea Otter Week would be a great combo. And luckily it is for us today. So I'm going to talk about, hold on one second. Let's see. All right, I'm gonna talk about sea otters and their importance in the estuary ecosystem. So my name is Chanel Hason. Sorry, I forgot to say that already. I'm the Director of Outreach and Community Relations for the Elakha Alliance, which I'll talk about a little bit who we are towards the end of the presentation. But I'm just going to dive right in. There we go. All right, so here's a little outline of my presentation today. We're going to talk a little bit about sea otter biology, so you can learn some things about these furry critters. We'll talk a little bit about sea otter's role in healthy estuary ecosystems, and then we'll talk about the future of sea otters here in Oregon. So let's dive right in. Sea otters, everyone's favorite furry marine mammal. They are part of the Mustelidae family, which is the weasel family. So they're related to wolverines and badgers and minks. There's 3 subspecies. We've got the northern sea otter, which is found in Washington, British Columbia, and Alaska. We've got the southern sea otter, who hangs out on the coast of Central California and Southern California. And then we've got the Asian sea otter, or the Russian sea otter, which is also referred to, and obviously they are in Russia and Northeast Japan. They spend the majority of their lives floating on their backs in the ocean. They are a 100% aquatic marine mammal. They rarely pull themselves up on the beaches. If they do, it's probably because they're sick. But sometimes they do pull themselves on rocks offshore to groom or just take a little rest. They live between 10 to 15 years. They're very social animals. They like to aggregate floating in rafts. And they are not a migratory species, which is why they don't naturally just repopulate an area that they once lived. They have a strong homing mechanism to wherever they were born. So most every other marine mammal has a big, thick layer of blubber, or a fancy word for fat. That keeps them warm in the cold ocean waters, but sea otters are the only one that lack that. So to keep them warm, they have a super duper dense, thick fur. It's the densest fur of any animal in the whole entire world. So if you do the OK symbol, that little circle is about 1 square inch. There's 1 million hairs in that one little circle just on the sea otter pelt. For reference, on the human head, we have about 100,000 hairs if you're lucky, so that's a huge difference. So this soft, luscious fur was sadly to their demise. In the mid-1700s, started the maritime fur trade, and after a couple decades, about 99% of the entire sea otter population was extirpated for their fur. And thankfully, some did survive the fur trade, but that is what happened in Oregon, and we haven't had sea otters since. There was a tiny translocation in the 70s, which is a whole other topic. I can answer questions about that later. But their historic range was from Baja, Mexico, up the Western Pacific, through Alaska, into Japan. So it's a very large range. So sea otters are eating machines. They have a super duper high metabolic rate, and they have to eat about 25% to 30% of their body weight each and every day. So for a 70-pound sea otter, needs to eat about 20 pounds of food every day. That equates to 3.6 tons a year. Usually at zoos and aquariums, they're one of the most expensive animals to keep on exhibit because they eat so much, and they also eat a lot of fancy food, seafood. So most of their diet consists of sea urchins, crabs, mussels, clams, but they can also be found snacking on octopus and marine worms. And each diet between individual is varied between each individual, and it's usually what their mom teaches them how to dive for. So sea otters have short, blunt skulls, and really cool, they have fracture-resistant teeth, so they never have to go to the underwater dentist. It's my favorite fact to tell kiddos, which is really super helpful when you have to eat all those hard-shelled invertebrates, right? But they also have the bite force the same as a black bear, which is about 80 pounds. So that also helps them crush those shells to get those clams and mussels. So sea otters are what's known in the animal kingdom as a keystone species. And a keystone species is one that has an effect on its environment disproportionate to its abundance. So in other words, just a few individuals can have a really big impact. An example of this is how sea otters prey upon sea urchins. So sea urchins consume kelp, which is the canopy-forming algae species that creates the underwater forests themselves. And these underwater forests provides food and shelter, nurseries for thousands of species. And as urchin density decreases from sea otter predation, so does the grazing pressure on kelp. And as a result, kelp forests flourish in the presence of sea otters. So we've come to understand that when sea otters are also missing for 100 years in Oregon, the sunflower sea star has been a predator eating sea urchins while sea otters have been missing. And unfortunately, we lost 99% of the entire sunflower sea star population along their whole distribution due to something called sea star wasting disease. And they haven't bounced back quite as quickly as some of the other sea star species. So right now, the Oregon coast is missing 2 key predators of purple urchins. So we are at a big imbalance. And for visually speaking, to the left is a healthy kelp forest ecosystem where sea otters are present, and to the right is where there are no sea otters, and that is what we call an urchin barren. So basically you look down to the ocean floor and all you see is a blanket of purple because sea urchins don't have any predators that eat them, so they're not going to hide like they normally do under rocks and crevices. And so they come out and they just engulf as much algae, kelp as they can. And unfortunately, they can live for a whole year without ever eating. So they kind of turn into a zombie state, as it's called, and have a really slow metabolism. And they can just wander around the seafloor waiting for a piece of kelp to float on down. So it's kind of the perfect storm situation, not in the best way for our kelp forests. So let's turn things around and talk about something more positive, and that is how sea otters play a really big role in healthy estuaries. So the Elkhorn Slough is one of California's largest and most significant estuaries. It's located near Monterey Bay. It provides a rich habitat for diverse wildlife, including over 340 species of birds, sea otters, fish, and invertebrates. The slough supports important tidal marshes as well, mudflats, and grasslands, making it a vital site for conservation and research. And if you ever get a chance, I highly suggest that you take a kayak trip in the Elkhorn Slough or an eco boat tour. You will see tons of wildlife, guaranteed. Its ecosystems play a crucial role in filtering water and providing nurseries for marine species like the sea otter. And it's also a key area for environmental education and obviously ecotourism as well. So let's talk about how they help eelgrass. There is one researcher in particular, Dr. Brent Hughes out of Sonoma State University. He's been the front runner in discovering the interconnectedness of sea otters and estuary health. His research discovered that sea otters play a crucial role in supporting eelgrass health in the Elkhorn Slough by controlling crab populations and other invertebrates that feed on small organisms like sea slugs, which help keep eelgrass free of harmful algae. So without sea otters, crabs become more abundant and reduce the number of these algae-eating sea slugs that you can see pictured there, leading to excessive growth on the eelgrass blades. And so this algae can block sunlight and hinder the eelgrass growth. So with the otters eating more crabs, allowing the slugs to eat more algae that's growing on the blades of the eelgrass, then the eelgrass can see the sun and photosynthesize and thrive and improve the overall health of the estuary. I hope you followed all of that along. It's always like a mixed process. But they also help restore degrading geology. So sea otters made the cover of Nature magazine earlier this year, which is super exciting, in 2024. And once again, led by Dr. Brent Hughes, which highlights how sea otters help reduce coastal erosion, particularly, once again, in California's Elkhorn Slough. The key mechanism involves the otter's predation on marsh crabs, which would otherwise burrow into the soil and eat the plant roots. And these crabs destabilize the marsh, contributing to erosion. By controlling the crab population, sea otters allow the marsh vegetation to thrive, leading to stronger root systems that protect against erosion. So here's a quote from Brent, who was the lead researcher on this project. And in areas where sea otters have returned, erosion has been reduced by up to 90%, which is huge. And we learned from Annie just how important it is to have decreased erosion in these estuaries because they're a habitat to multiple species and help filter our water. And so these field experiments and long-term monitoring show that otters slows the degradation of these creek banks and salt marshes even as sea levels rise and tidal currents intensify. So while sea otters don't completely eliminate erosion, they do restore the ecosystem to a more natural state and support its resilience against future environmental pressures. So that sounds awesome. So in summary, sea otters and estuaries is a winning combination, right? All the good things. So from water quality to a great place for salmon smolts and juvenile crabs and fish, to a resting place for migratory birds, to increase carbon storage, as we learned from Annie, and decreased erosion. It's no wonder why people call sea otters climate change warriors. So let's move on to what does that actually mean about the future of sea otters here in Oregon. So the Elakha Alliance is a nonprofit created by the late David Hatch, who's pictured there wearing a sea otter pelt regalia. He was a Siletz tribal member. And we have been around as a nonprofit since 2020, but we officially came together in 2018. We are also a small but mighty staff. We have 3 full-time employees along with an incredibly passionate board of directors who all have incredible backgrounds themselves. And so our main mission is to restore a healthy population of sea otters here on the Oregon coast, and in the process help make Oregon's marine ecosystems more robust and resilient. The key is to really help our marine ecosystems because without human intervention, I'm not quite sure how long we will have our kelp forests around. And if you're not familiar, sea otters have been missing on the Oregon coast for over 100 years due to the fur trade. And so we are working very hard with a lot of the coastal tribes as well, and a whole number of other stakeholders to bring sea otters back to the Oregon coast. So something that we did, we published a scientific feasibility study in 2022 with the top 6 leading sea otter scientists in the world. And so here are the 5 key takeaways of that. And you can view this on our website if you want to dive into all the chapters themselves. I also have chapter summaries, so you don't have to read each one. But number 1, reintroductions have been successful in the past. Approximately 30% of today's global number of sea otters are due to successful reintroductions in Southeast Alaska, British Columbia, and Washington. And number 2, reintroduced sea otters in Oregon is likely to succeed if done carefully. So overall, our feasibility study did confirm that yes, it is feasible to bring them back to Oregon. And number 3, which is really important for this presentation, is that estuaries might be a great place to reintroduce sea otters. So along with nearshore ocean habitats, several Oregon estuaries may be suitable for a founding sea otter population like Coos Bay or Yaquina Bay. Number 4, reintroducing sea otters will have many positive and negative direct and indirect effects. Of course, that is a huge thing, is to bring sea otters back. There's a lot of things to take into consideration. And 5, social, economic, legal, and regulatory issues must be considered. So it's essential that we reach out to many stakeholders and community groups that may be impacted, which we are doing. I also want to note that U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service published their own feasibility assessment on sea otter reintroduction several months after we published ours. And that was sea otter reintroduction in both Northern California and Oregon. And they also said that it was feasible. They would be the ones to actually do a sea otter translocation. There is no proposal currently for a sea otter translocation, but just the fact that they did that and said it was feasible, and also hosted several open houses along the whole West Coast from Astoria, Oregon, down to San Francisco Bay, is very positive. And the summary of all those open houses was just published. So I would say go take a look at that. So what are our next steps? So currently we are doing a lot of outreach and public engagement because it's very important as a grassroots activism group to engage the community and make sure that the people of Oregon know that we used to have sea otters and we don't have them, and how important they are, 1, to our tribes, 2, to our coastal ecosystems, and 3, economically, it would bring a lot of money to our coastal communities with ecotourism. So a lot of wins there. And on top of that, we are starting to do some more political advocacy. So you'll learn more about that in the next coming weeks if you follow our social media and sign up for our newsletter. We're also doing lots of tribal engagement and leadership development with them to work on a sea otter reintroduction plan and hear their recommendations. And also we are funding lots of research projects as well. So we are working with the Big Fish Lab to figure out where great white sharks hang out on the Oregon coast. We're working on a fisheries impact study at the moment. We published a social South Coast tourism impact study last year. You can find that on our website. That estimated about $3.5 million of income on the South Coast if sea otters were present just for people coming to view the wildlife. So we're doing lots of stuff behind the scenes. So if you want to stay connected, that'd be great because I do all our social media. So I love engaging with everyone online. So you can find us on all these great social media platforms. All our previous presentations are on YouTube, a great place if you want to learn more. And our website you can get to at OregonSeaOtters.org is a little easier to remember if you don't know how to spell Elakha. And how you can help, you can sign up for our monthly newsletter if you scan that QR code there on the top left. We're also a 501c3 nonprofit, so we depend on donations to continue our work. So if you feel like donating anything, that is great. You can scan that other QR code on the right. And just overall spreading the message that sea otters are missing in Oregon and it's really important to bring them back. That's the biggest thing for us. So please do spread that, bring it up at Thanksgiving with your friends and family or at your next dinner party. I'm sure lots of people will want to talk about sea otters. And that's all I got. So if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat feature. I see that there's some there already. I'll let Katie facilitate that.
Yeah, so we've got 2 in the Q&A box and I see 1 in the chat. So we'll get to those 3 first. If anybody else has any questions, feel free to drop them in there. Our first question is from Garrick. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And they ask, did the Oregon extinction of sea otters create the 2 separate species along the North American coast, the northern and the southern? And if not, which species were in the Oregon population?
Good question. So they were, I don't know if they were 2 subspecies previously, since their habitat range was so expansive, but currently the two bones DNA from the southern and the northern subspecies are found along the Oregon coast in shell middens. So Oregon used to be a place where those 2 subspecies intermingled with each other, and currently that hasn't happened in a century. And so all of the sea otters in California, which are the southern subspecies, are from the surviving 50 off of Big Sur that survived the fur trade. So they're all basically sort of related. So that's why they are listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act, and sea otters in Washington and North and Alaska, British Columbia, where there's 70,000 plus in total, they are very genetically diverse. So to bring sea otters back to Oregon and possibly a reintroduction in Northern California at the same time would be really great for the genetic diversity of the species overall for sea otters.
Absolutely. Ed asks, what are the negatives of introducing otters?
What? There's no negative. So obviously there are some impacts possibly to certain groups of people, yeah, let's see. So sometimes there's crabbing and fishermen who think that their sea otters will eat all of their catch. Well, sea otters don't eat fish, so they're not going to impact rockfish or anything like that. They do eat Dungeness crab, but there's not going to be enough sea otters to really make a huge impact in that arena. And the good thing about Dungeness crab is that they can go down to deeper depths where sea otters can't dive. And so it's all about engaging and sharing information with these different groups of people to make sure everybody's on the same page with the right information about what happened previously in other locations. May not be exactly what happens in Oregon because we're a totally different ecosystem.
Yeah, we won't know until it happens. And then we've got a question from April in the chat here. April says, I am in Texas. Is there anything I can do to help from afar? Also, is the decline in kelp forest from sea urchins, would that be the cause of the reduced number of summer resident gray whales this summer off the Oregon coast? Good
Wow.
question.
Okay, let me read that. Well, hi, April from Texas. I was born in Dallas, so yeehaw. From afar, yeah, if you want to become a monthly donor, that's always super helpful. Or just following us on social media, and we have events that are virtual, which you can attend. Right now, we have a virtual Sea Otter silent auction art show for Sea Otter Awareness Week. So that's really exciting. I can put that link in the chat. And so the decline of kelp forests, it's a variety of factors. So urchins are one factor, too. Rising ocean temperatures are also another one. And there has been a decline in the actual size of gray whales and numbers on the coast, especially this season, which is attributed to lower kelp abundance off of the Oregon coast, which was just a publication that maybe I can find too while I pause for another question.
Any other questions for both Annie or Chanel? Give you a few moments while Chanel's looking up an awesome article.
I have a question for Chanel, if I can ask questions.
Yeah, of course.
Well, we were talking earlier about the negative impacts of otter reintroduction, in particular, the impacts to Dungeness crabs and the Dungeness crab fishery. But one thing that comes to mind for me is we also have a European crab invasion in many of our estuaries, which is wreaking havoc on estuarine ecosystems and seagrass in particular. So have you seen any research or studies that might suggest that sea otters might help that problem? Because if they eat crab, they probably would eat European green crab.
Yeah, they have been spotted in Monterey Bay eating European green crabs. So that is great. So it's hopeful. I can't say for sure, what they're going to choose to eat or not. But since they have been eating them in Monterey, I have, maybe a good feeling that they would eat them here. But yeah, it just takes a lot of time and and energy to sit there and watch what sea otters are eating in Monterey Bay. And thankfully, there's a lot of people that actually do that.
Mm-hmm. We've got a few more questions popping up now. Chris asks, what's the cutest thing you've seen a sea otter do?
Some of the sea otters at the zoo and the aquarium here in Oregon, they suck on their paw when they're just floating, and it's just really sweet.
And then we've got a question for Annie. What are the most common eelgrass species in Oregon, and do these species differ from Washington and or California?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So there are two species of eelgrass found in Oregon's estuaries. One is a native species of eelgrass, and the other is a invasive species that's a little bit smaller. Fortunately, they grow in different tidal elevations, so they're not necessarily like out competing each other. So those are the only two that we have in Oregon. To my knowledge, that's the same case in Washington and California. There's also surf grass, which lives on the nearshore ocean, rocky habitats rather than estuaries. Yeah. Thanks
Awesome.
for the question.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I found some great whales in the kelp.
Oh, okay. We've got another good question. What is the biggest barrier to sea otter reintroduction?
Well, we need an actual proposal to happen. So I think that's the biggest thing. And how to help with that is to talk to your legislatures is really important coming up soon. So telling the people who make the decisions that, yes, you want a sea otter reintroduction here in Oregon, or if you live in Northern California, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service will be the ones to ultimately do that. It's also very, very expensive to do a sea otter reintroduction. So that's also probably another very large barrier. Yes, our executive director said the biggest barrier, in her opinion, is the lack of political support. So yes, if you want to call up your legislatures, there's a very easy website to find out that information. If you've never done it before, it's super quick and easy. It's not intimidating at all. That is very helpful. We're happy to help you do that if you need any help.
And both of our organizations are really good about putting out specific calls to action when we really need to mobilize you for certain things. So making sure that you are subscribed to both Elakha and Oregon Shore's newsletters or following us on social media. We want to make it really easy for you to speak up. So if you just follow along, we'll share those opportunities. And if you ever have any questions about it, we want to help you do it. So we're always there for that. Another good question, will Elakha or Oregon Shores host any Talk to Your Congressperson events? That's a pretty good idea.
We'll let you know.
Yeah.
I haven't planned yet, but that's a great idea. And I think Elakha and Oregon Shores would be a great little partnership with that. Maybe a little co-led one.
Absolutely. I love that.
Yeah, that would be amazing. We've got another question. This one's about the Asian sea otters. And has there ever been a history of a successful translocation of them?
You know, I don't know too much about the Asian sea otters. I've been hyper-focused on the northern and southern. If Michelle St. Martin is watching, I saw her ask the question. Maybe she knows, but I am not quite sure. You stumped me there.
Oh, another good question. Where would we get the sea otters that would be used for reintroduction to the Oregon coast?
Great question. So That is ultimately up to U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to decide which subspecies they want to reintroduce. The southern subspecies is listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act, so there's a little bit more red tape in order to try and do a translocation of that species. It's not impossible, but just a little more difficult. The northern subspecies in Alaska is very plentiful, so we suggest in our feasibility study that might be a good source population, because taking about 50 to 60 from there wouldn't have a big impact on that population or the ecosystem.
Yes. More questions coming in. Do sea otters mate for life, and how long do they take care of their babies?
Great questions. I love this. Sea otters do not mate for life. Very opposite of that. So when they're not mating, sea otters are usually in different rafts of sexes. So there's female rafts and there's male rafts, and males and females, you know, do their thing. Females get pregnant, have a pup, one pup a year, and they're with that pup for 6 to 9 months. And then they teach the baby everything. And then the baby can go off on its own and hunt for itself. Then they get pregnant again and have a pup the next year. So it's that kind of cycle. But yeah, they do not mate for life. Sea otter moms are super single moms of the animal kingdom.
Lots to teach those little babies right away too. And then we've got another question, and actually Chanel is the perfect person to answer this question about a recent sea otter sighting in Cannon Beach, because she got to see it. And then have there been any new sightings that you've heard about, Chanel?
Yeah. So there were 2 males that were spotted together off of the Oregon coast in late June of this year at Ecola Point. And there were some sightings that they had been there for almost a month previously. So that was very exciting. It's the first time that I was aware of 2 live sea otters being seen together on the Oregon coast. And unfortunately, after July 3rd was the last time anyone saw them. And I know there was illegal fireworks on that beach on 4th of July. So that might have spooked them. It's, you know, hard to tell what happened, but they haven't been seen since. And there hasn't been any live sightings that I know of so far. But yeah, keep your eyes peeled. It's very rare, but sometimes we do have some lone males that swim down from the Washington population because they have the freedom to roam and look for some ladies. And unfortunately, we don't have any, not quite yet. So hopefully one day they can find some ladies off of the Oregon coast.
And then Chris asks, what is Oregon Shores doing to help estuaries, which helps sea otters?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Yeah, so we're mostly focused on estuary management planning. So basically strengthening public policy around how our estuaries are managed so that critical habitat for sea otters, such as eelgrass meadows, are protected from a number of development projects, from upland, water quality impacts, et cetera. So we definitely work in the public policy space, just trying to strengthen those plans. But another thing we're working on is broader statewide protections for eelgrass and kelp habitat. There's more news coming about that soon. But essentially, yeah, we're thinking of creative ways that we could, set targets for the state and boost kind of overall protections across the state, so we don't have to focus on every single estuary planet at a time in order to protect eelgrass meadows. Because we're losing eelgrass meadows really rapidly, we want to see more collective and cooperative support from agencies to come together and find a way to protect those habitats. And also to support restoration of kelp forests, because we're losing those too really rapidly.
Yeah, one thing I think Elakha and Oregon Shores both do really well is looking towards those long-term plans to ensure success for a long time. So it's a big question to answer, but it's important. And then Chris also asks if there are currently any threats to estuaries along the Oregon coast, and is more information available on our website. And so Annie, while you cover some of those threats, I will make sure to get those links in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of threats to our estuaries. Reduced water quality is certainly one, from agriculture practices in the watershed, just poor management of stormwater and runoff. Essentially, a lot of excess nutrients are coming through our watersheds and into our estuaries, are particularly in flooding and heavy rain events. Which leads to harmful algal blooms, and increased turbidity in the water, which can block out light availability to our seagrass meadows, and impact the algae growth on the seagrass blades, like Chanel was talking about in California. So that's just one impact. We're also seeing impacts from ocean acidification, warming ocean waters, from climate change. Development on our estuaries has been problematic because it's altered tidal flow and destroyed some wetland habitat. So that makes our estuaries less capable of handling, major flooding events or sea level rise. Another thing that's happening with sea level rise is our estuarine habitats are migrating upslope as the sea levels rise, and they run up against infrastructure built on the very edge of the estuaries. So there's nowhere for those habitats to go. So we call that coastal squeeze, when habitats are squeezed out of existence. I could go on. There's a lot of estuaries.
Yeah, well, if you want even a deeper dive into estuaries and you're in the Lincoln City area, Annie will be talking all things estuaries at the Pelican Brewing Siletz Bay location this Thursday, which is really exciting. And you can visit our website for other events coming up. And Elakha has a packed week for Sea Otter Awareness Week. So like we've said a few times, following our newsletter and our social media will make sure that you are up to date on everything both of our organizations are doing, and other organizations, because both of us believe that we want to share all the awesome work that all the amazing groups on the coast are doing. So it's a great way to stay plugged in. Chanel's got that link for the Elakha Alliance events in the chat now. And thank you all so much for joining us tonight for celebrating estuaries and celebrating otters. We hope to see you at some of our future events. And with that, I hope you all have a good night.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Happy Estuaries Week / Sea Otter Awareness Week.